The Tale of Sleepy John. Once upon a time, there was a young man named John who was always sleeping, no matter the time or place. One day he came across an inn where some farmers were feeding their horses. Quietly, John climbed into one of their carts, lay down on the straw and fell asleep. After travelling for a while, the farmers noticed John sleeping in the cart. They said to each other, "What should we do with him? We have a beer cask here. Let's put him inside it and leave it in the forest." So they placed him in the cask, sealed it, and drove off. John remained asleep in the cask for a long time. Suddenly he woke up, confused to find himself locked in the cask, with no idea how he got there or where he was. He heard something moving around the cask. Looking through the small hole, he saw a group of wolves gathered near the rocks, were drawn by the scent of a human. One of the wolves pushed its tail through the hole. Thinking his time had come, John grabbed hold of the tail and wound it around his hand. The wolf panicked and began running, dragging the cask behind him. The rest of the wolves fled in every direction, terrified by the bouncing cask. Eventually, the cask smashed against a rock and broke apart. John let go of the wolf, which ran off as fast as it could. Now free, John found himself in a wild mountain region. Wandering around, he met a hermit. The hermit said to him, "You may stay here with me. I will die in 3 days. Bury me when the time comes, and I will reward you well." A person who lives in solitude for religious devotion. John agreed and stayed with the hermit. On the 3rd day, as the hermit lay dying, he gave John 3 magical items. First, he handed him a stick and said, "Wherever you point this stick, you will instantly find yourself there." Next, he gave him a knapsack, saying, "Whatever you desire, you will find it in this knapsack." Lastly, he gave him a cap and said, "As soon as you put this cap on, no one will be able to see you." With those words, the hermit passed away, and John buried him as promised. John's adventure begins. John gathered his belongings, pointed the stick, and said, "Let me be instantly in the town where the king lives." In an instant, he was in the town, where he heard an intriguing tale. Every night the queen wore out 12 pairs of shoes, yet no one had been able to figure out how or where. Lords from all over came to the palace, offering to uncover the mystery, but none succeeded. Hearing this, John went to the palace and asked to meet the king. When John appeared before the king, he said, "I want to uncover the queen's secret." The king asked, "Who are you?" John replied, "I am Sleepy John." The king laughed and said, "How can you possibly track the queen when you're always sleeping? If you fail, you will lose your head." John boldly said, "I will try all the same." That evening, the queen went to her chamber to sleep, while John lay in the adjoining room through which she had to pass. Pretending to be asleep, John carefully observed her. The queen, suspecting he might be awake, lit a candle and scorched the soles of his feet to test him. John, however, didn't stir, and the queen believed he was deeply asleep. She took 12 new pairs of shoes and slipped away. The magical pursuit, John got up, put on the invisible cap, and pointed his stick, saying, "Let me be where the queen is." He found himself at a rock where the earth opened up and 2 dragons emerged. The dragons carried the queen on their backs and flew her to a leaden forest. John followed, pointing his stick again to appear in the leaden forest. He broke off a twig as proof and placed it in his knapsack. When the twig snapped, it made a loud ringing sound like a bell. The queen, startled, continued her journey. John followed her to a tin forest, where he broke another twig and placed it in his knapsack. The sound frightened the queen even more. Finally, John followed her to a silver forest. There he broke a twig again, which rang so loudly that the queen fainted. The dragons carried her to a green meadow, where a group of devils revived her and held a great feast. John, still invisible, joined the feast. Since the cook was absent, he sat in the cook's place. The devils set aside food for the cook, but John ate it all. They were confused and startled by the disappearing food, but carried on with their celebration. After the feast, the devils danced with the queen until she wore out all 12 pairs of shoes. The dragons then carried her back to the palace,